tonight exclusively on WAMN News, embattled Melville Mayor George Gear's response following Mike Nahan's call for inquiry on his council.
Aboriginal activists concerned over tougher prison legislation for high-risk offenders.
Another Northbridge assault leaving victim battered and bruised.
And on Western Perspective, Basil's reboot, a Perth TV star's Lord Mayor bid.
This is the Evening News with Ivan Leung and Sarah Smith.
Good evening. Melville City Council has been mired in controversy again after a bowling club was granted an unprecedented 50-year lease with a proposed 49-year extension. Allegations of conflict of interest were raised after Mayor George Gear, himself a member of the club, used his casting vote to pass the extraordinary lease. This week, with the support of former Melville Mayor Russell Aubrey, former opposition leader Mike Nahan used his parliamentary privilege to raise the issue in Parliament, calling for any further consideration of the lease agreement to be postponed pending an inquiry into the probity of the decision. Mr. Gear gave an exclusive interview to WAMN News this week, responding to the controversy. What do you make of Mike Nahan's using his parliamentary privilege to make his case regarding your council?
Well, I don't think much about it at all, to tell you the truth, because he didn't bring up anything new. He didn't bring up any arguments about why, any solid arguments about why an inquiry is needed into the council. I can tell him, and through your viewers, that the council is being particularly well run.
Do you believe that your trust has been rocked in the community because of what happened on Wednesday?
No, not at all. Look, I've always put the community first, and if we go back to Mr. Aubrey's time, they'll remember that he wanted to put an industrial complex called a wave park on 4.5 hectares of public open space, priceless open space, and give that up so the community couldn't use it. Now, I saved that. I saved that open space, and because I put the community first. Mr. Aubrey was putting business first. So, no, I don't think my approval in the community will go down at all.
What about other clubs in the area? Would you give the similar courtesy? Would you give the similar leases to them?
Well, maybe, but each lease has to be judged on its merits. Now, particularly when you look at the Melville Bowling Club, it's been there 62 years. And it's more than just a bowling club. It is a real community centre because at least 1,000 people a month on average go there for community functions. It's where the community goes when they want to celebrate. But also it has a number of groups that use it as their headquarters, informally. So what I want to do moving forward is to formalise that and make the centre, if you like, a community centre, recognise its value.
What about the brewery? Is there any plans for brewery? Is there any plans for the club to do whatever it wants? Because that's what Mike Nahan says before he tabled his speech in Parliament. No,
look, there's no plans. The lease hasn't even been signed. I mean, it's not coming before council until next Tuesday. So any talk of breweries is way off the mark.
You say that, are you guaranteeing that this won't happen?
No, I don't. Look, I would be against a brewery going down there. And I'm sure councils would be against a brewery. And nothing in the lease will mention a brewery. I'm sure, I can tell you that.
As new legislation for high-risk offenders came into effect earlier this month, the High Risk Offenders Board will manage and coordinate the state's most serious offenders following their initial prison sentences. Aboriginal activists feel the bill doesn't allow for Indigenous Australians to have a fair second chance within society after serving time. Sarah Smith explores their concerns further.
The High-Risk Serious Offenders Bill will now see the courts able to keep WA's most serious and dangerous criminals behind bars or under strict supervision. Sexual or violent offenders who are nearing their release date and deemed likely to pose an unacceptable risk to the community could be issued a continuing detention or supervision order.
That fairness is done by the courts themselves, in which the offender can speak up and defend themselves in court.
Minister for Corrective Services Fran Logan said with advice given to the court, they can request their freedom, demonstrating changes to their behaviour, their likely future behaviour and their danger to the public.
They talk about closing the gap and reducing incarceration, yet they could bring out a bill like this where someone who has already served their sentence could be deemed under the high risk offenders bill and kept in prison for until the law system determines it's okay to set them free.
Nulla Maya CEO Mervyn Eads believes the bill should be amended, with calls for Aboriginals facing potential scrutiny under this bill to be viewed on a case-by-case basis.
Serious offenders bill and the ramifications on our Aboriginal people of Western Australia is massive, because this bill, what they've just passed on the 1st of September, 80% of our people fit into that criteria, and could be held to account and kept in the system much longer than they originally were sentenced to and served as had already served.
Mr. Eads says if they've paid their dues, why should they still be seen as serious offenders, raising questions about the rehabilitation process and the punitive approach within our prison system.
Every case is different. Every person is different. Don't do a bill that'll just categorise them without giving them that term of reference of redemption.
Sarah Smith, WAMN News.
Perth detectives are investigating a Northbridge assault that occurred on Sunday, August 16th, where a 20-year-old man received injuries including facial fractures and other facial injuries requiring plastic surgery.
The victim was with a friend in a car park on Aberdeen Street and were approached by a group of males. After talking for 10 minutes, one of the males stole the victim's belt buckle and ran away. The victim chased after and upon catching up was assaulted by the male and 2 others in the group. Detectives believe the male in the footage may be able to assist with their investigation, or anyone with information to call Crime Stoppers.
Last week we featured a story regarding the issue of overcrowding at Shalom House WA. We would like to clarify that the cost for development of a new facility would be $4 million, not $400 million as broadcasted.
WA's top doctor has warned the state's aged care system is a set of dominoes ready to topple. The president of WA's AMA says the aged care sector needs more funding to prevent a Victorian-style tragedy from happening here.
We need to be intervening now to make sure that these organisations and these facilities are prepared to deal with the workforce and the PPE and the other risk controls. And the AMA is stepping forward. We've been coordinating meetings with the aged care sector and offering support in the area of getting their facilities ready. But the problem is if they don't have the dollars to spend on the workforce, to spend on the PPE, then they're not going to be able to safely protect their facilities from what is an unprecedented risk. And that's where the Commonwealth are going to have to step in and provide further funding to ensure that that big domino of aged care doesn't fall, taking its workforce with it, meaning that its residents end up within our state hospitals, and then you have COVID spreading through the state hospitals. And as we've seen from Victoria, our state hospitals are ill-equipped to protect healthcare workers from this virus.
A new asymptomatic testing regime for border security workers will allow any persons working in places where travellers enter WA to take a free COVID test every week until November 30. Those who fit the criteria for an asymptomatic test will receive their test results within 24 hours, with no need to self-isolate while waiting. Other workers will be eligible for the free tests, including staff at quarantine hotels, security and health staff, as well as WA Police and Defence Force members.
Borders program is an asymptomatic testing program which ensures that people who don't show any symptoms but work in these elevated risk environments can be tested on a weekly basis to ensure they don't acquire coronavirus and therefore don't spread it to their family and friends.
Lifeline WA will be boosted with a new $5 million commitment from the state opposition if it wins the next state election. The organisation currently receives $500,000 from the McGowan government, but the opposition wants to raise it to $1 million each year for 5 years. Opposition leader Lisa Harvey said the funding is critical for Lifeline and is calling on the state government to match their commitment.
We know that they need more help. We know that they're expecting even more calls from people in distress over the next couple of years. So our commitment will be to increase that $660,000 commitment to $1 million a year for 5 years. so that Lifeline know they've got a guarantee of $1 million from the state government to assist with their services.
The Britain and European unions are in a spat over trade border issues, with goods between Ireland and Northern Ireland's free flow arrangement continuing, even though it breaches international law. A statement has been released following emergency talks, indicating the British government's legislation will continue despite the EU threatening to break the Brexit treaty. Internet giant Google and Twitter will increase their efforts to stamp out false information before the United States presidential race. With the polling scheduled to go ahead in November, misleading information about individual candidates will be scrutinised by search engines. It's understood that cyber attacks were launched against Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump's campaigns recently without success.
And coming up on Crossfire this Tuesday night at 5:30, Aboriginal activist Mervyn Eads goes head-to-head with the Australian Christian Lobby WA Director Peter Betts to debate the Black Lives Matter movement and Indigenous issues in Western Australia.
Doesn't matter whether you're black or white. Hey, we're one Australia, and there are different people for all different backgrounds.
Yeah, we're one Australia, but how come our people are still living in third world conditions if we're one Australian?
Look, some Aboriginal people are, but hey, some white people.
We go to remote communities. No white people live in the conditions my people living in the remote communities. They still living in tin shacks.
Now, as you've all heard earlier, this is Taylor Hannah's final newscast after spending almost 3 years here at WAMN News. Now, I would like to clarify, 2.5 years from 2017 to the end of 2019, and then she came back during the peak of the coronavirus period to help us out, and I'm sure all viewers will join me now in sharing our appreciation for your efforts. 467 stories, including the exclusive coming out on Monday, and we talk about countless online broadcast stories, bulletins, piece to cameras, live on social media. For a young person, no matter how you look at it, it is an achievement for you.
A massive achievement. I'm very proud of all the work that I've done here at WAM, and I wouldn't have done it if I wasn't here.
And half an hour of expansion of this program wouldn't have been possible without you.
What are you going to do without me, Ivan?
Ladies and gentlemen, she always teases me with this in the office, and I will miss you. And I will miss this. And whatever you do in the future, we know that will be great. And you're always welcome to come back, as always.
Thank you, Ivan. That's very much appreciated.
So I'll let you say final goodbyes.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
See you later.